Greetings, students. This is Chapter 7, and it's fairly involved. We've got the summary sheet on which we've got several nested if statements, and an index and a match statement. We have the database sheet. We're going to be setting up an advanced criteria, and then we have the loan where we're going to be creating an amortization schedule. So bear with me while I read these instructions, and we'll get this done. The first one is in cell G8 in the summary worksheet. Insert a date function to calculate the number of years between 1/1/2018 in cell H2 and the last remodel date from the last remodel column. So we have to use notice absolute cell addressing here, so it copies down correctly. So the start date is going to be F8, where we have our last remodel. The end date is absolute value of H2, or the absolute cell address of H2, which is our comparison date. So we get 13.75 years since remodel. And then you drag that and copy it down the column. The next thing it asks us to do is to insert a nested logical function to display the required pet deposit for each unit. If the unit has 2 or more bedrooms and was remodeled within the last 10 years, the deposit is $275, which is from cell H4. If not, the deposit is $200, which is cell H5. Use relative and mixed references correctly, and the pet deposit for unit 1 is $200. So let's take a look at this if statement. First of all, we had a hint that we were going to have 2 choices or 2 logical tests, so we have to use the AND function. So if C8, which is the number of bedrooms, is greater than or equal to 2, and G8, which is the, which is what? Is less than H3, the comparison date in the last remodel, then the value of true is H4, else the value of is false is H55. So if C8, which is the number of bedrooms, is greater than or equal to 2, and G8, which is the year since the remodel, is less than H3, which is the number of years. Do that again. If C8, which is the number of bedrooms, is greater than or equal to 2, and G8, which is the year since the remodel, is less than H3, which is the number of years since remodeled constants. Then we get our pet deposit, and you copy that down. The next in cell I8 is to enter a nested logical function to display need to remodel if the apartment is unoccupied or no, and was last remodeled more than 10 years ago. For all other apartments, display no change. So we can look at this one. Is occupied, yes, so we know there's not going to be a change to it. So let's look at the formula. If V8 is equal to no and G8 is greater than 10, then we'll need to remodel. But because the apartment 101 is occupied, then the value of and is false. Whenever you have an and, both values have to be true for the logical test to be true. Next, we're going to set up an index and match formula. What we're looking for is that when we look at the index function, we're looking first of all for the array. So our array is the entire database that we're looking at here, from A8 to I57. Then we need to find the row number. Well, to find the row number, we need to match our B2 value in column A to see whether or not it equals 101. So for the match function, the lookup value is B2. The array to look up is column A, A8 to A57, and we want an exact match. And then from that, we go back to our index array, which is the entire database, and we select the column number. So it's column 1, 2, 3, 4. So column 4. Let's look at that again. The array for the match function is the entire database, A8 to I-157. The row number is the match of B2, which is where we have 101, and the array for the match function is A8 to A57, which is column A. And we want an exact match, so the last argument is 0. And then for the column number, we are going back to the entire database here in front of us for the index number, for the index value of column 4. All right, on the database sheet, then we're asked to set up a criteria, and I've already done that. This criteria range is named criteria, and you can use that within your functions. We want to enter conditions in the criteria range for unoccupied 2- and 3-bedroom apartments that need to be remodeled. So, number of bedrooms is 2 and 3. They're not occupied. Year since remodel is greater than 10, and the recommendation is to remodel. So we're going to set up an advanced filter. The list range is all of our data, and you'll have the full list here when you select yours. The criteria range has already been set up for us. And then we're going to filter the list in place, leaving us with 9 records that need to be remodeled. All right, I had problems with these 3 database functions. When I submitted this assignment to your grader, it came up and told me that it wanted some XLMN number instead of the name of the field. And I think they're wrong and we're right. So what I'm going to show you here, there are going to be 3 things that you're going to get counted off for. And what I want you to do is send me an email that says, remember Mrs. Lancaster, the decount function didn't work. And send me the number of points that were reduced, that it took off for you. So the total number of points for all 3 of these, send me an email and remind me of this decount problem for chapter 7, and I'll give you back those points because I believe that I'm right. So what we're looking at is we want to count the values in A15 to A65, which is our entire database. We want to count the unit number, which is the name of a field, and we're going to use our criteria range here that we've already set up, and we get a 9. Then the same is true for the value of lost rent, but this time we want to sum the rental price. And then the year of the oldest remodel will be the dmin, the dmin function. And we're looking at the last remodel date. So on the loan worksheet now, first of all, we have to put in and calculate the summary of our calculations here at the number of periods, which is B4 times B5. Payments per year is 12, and the number of years is 30. The monthly rate will take the annual rate, which is B6, and divide it by B4, which is the number of payments per year, and then our payment function. It likes for you to put this negative sign on the present value, and it'll grade you off if you put it in front of the payment function. So put it on the present value. The interest rate, the number of periods, and the present value in negative, and that will give you your payment. The next calculation is the cumulative interest paid. That's the total interest paid for the loan. So it's the CUM IPMT function. The rate is our monthly rate. The number of periods is 360. The present value, again, this should be negative. The start period is 1 and the end period is 360, the value in E3. So now I got to take this fix. I still got it wrong. Okay, E4. Okay, it didn't like it with that. I put the negative sign in front of the cumulative interest payment function. It didn't like it there in front of the present value for some reason. Anyway, you've got your cumulative total interest paid. Now it wants us to figure out the payment dates. On cell C11, you should use equals B7 to get the first payment date. And then in cell C12, it wants us to use this nested function. We're going to use the date function with the years being coming from cell C11, the month coming from cell C11 plus 1 to increment the month, and the days coming from cell C11. So it's kind of a convoluted way to add a month to a date, but that's the nested function that you need. And then we'll copy that function down the row, a column. Okay, now we're working on our beginning and ending balances. So we start our beginning balance in D11, and we're going to reduce it by the amount of the principal payment, and that gives us the ending balance. And you're going to copy this all the way down, because once we get our payment set up, then you're going to reduce the balances by the principal payment only. And you might want to double check your calculations, because interest paid plus the principal payment, notice down here, is $57.38.12, which is the amount of our monthly payment. So you can double check your work that way. Now for the interest payment, the rate is our E4 value, the period is our B11 value, the number of periods is E3, and the present value is negative minus E2 for the first payment. Now, be sure and be careful with these absolute cell addresses. If you don't put them in correctly and you copy it down the row, you're going to get number or value errors, because you want to make sure that rate never changes, that period never changes. The period changes, payment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We want it to move down the row, but we want it to remain in column B. The number of your period doesn't change, the cell address doesn't change, and the present value is going to be not changing in this case. In the second value, we've got the exact same thing, so copy that formula down. It's E4, absolute cell address, E4, absolute B12, absolute cell address E3, and negative E2. So we're calculating against the loan amount each time. The same is true for the principal payment. Our rate is in E4, our period is in B11, and that should be an absolute cell address. Our number of periods is in E3, and the present value is still in E2. So that calculates the payment. And then you reduce the balance each time by the number of the principal payment. Now we have our what if analysis. We want the present value of future rent. So we collect $2,000 a month on 8 units in the complex, and we want to find out what our future rent is going to be when we finish this big project. So the interest rate is still in E4, 0.40%. The number of periods is still 360, but this time the payment that we're looking at is I2, which is $2,000 a monthly rent, times I3, which is the number of units that we have. And that gives us a future value on our rent. Not the future value of a loan amount, but the future value of our rent. All right, this has been a fairly complex assignment. You can watch this video as many times as you want to, but always remember you can send me your spreadsheet and the instructions, and I'll be happy to help you. Also, when you I don't know if you've discovered this yet, but if you go to view submissions, it will tell you what was wrong in the cells so that when you submit it again, you can get a better grade.